All right, let's watch ISC together. Or I guess it's a Journey to 4.0 video titled Design Brief Engineer. And like I said earlier, yesterday we tried to guess what we thought we would see, what we would see. An engineer would not have been on my list because I thought it was pretty well shared already, and they said it was something like new. So, all right, let's see what we get here.
At CitizenCon 2952, we debuted a new recurring initiative called Journey to 4.0, where we stepped a bit away from our traditional weekly behind-the-scenes format of Inside Star Citizen to tell stories at various points of progression leading up to the next major milestone in our continuing development after 3.18. And one of those more different within that batch were called Design Brief Investigations, where we looked at the earliest phases of a feature that only existed at that time in the text and crude diagrams of a planning document. And no, before you ask, don't ask to see the planning documents. It's all just fidelities and bespokes all over the place anyway. I'm kidding.
So, an ISC?
Mostly. So on this next Journey to 4.0, we're diving into another design brief that's been discussed, debated, kicked around, pitched, and repitched over the years internally, imagined and theory crafted for just as long by the community, and has finally now been signed off by the multitude of game directors to become the next stage in the resource management system. So, without further ado, we present to you Design Brief Engineer, the next fundamental component of true multi-crew gameplay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Stop saying that. True modularity. Stop it.
And one more thing. Fair warning before the comments come in. Since this next step in the resource management, now called engineer gameplay system, exists mostly in design stage at this moment, we did let Will, Dave, and Alex on the ISC capture team get creative in visualizing the stuff that's being discussed and that's still being built out by the developers at the moment.
Okay.
So what you're about to hear is still very much work in progress, but what you're about to see at times is the content of crazy people. And
Thank you, Commander.
Because they're exactly like me.
All right, well, that's good. That I think he's setting the expectations like pretty well early on. Is a lot of this is imagined stuff.
Sorry.
I mean, I saw the toilet on Twitter, so I'm aware that there is an exploding toilet. That's about the extent of what I'm aware of from this video. It's hard to miss the toilet on Twitter yesterday. Of course, a Carrack. The perfect platform for an engineer. I think everyone wants to be the engineer on a Carrack first, I would imagine.
What is your role as an engineer? You, as the engineer, are responsible for the resource management of your ship, the priorities of the items, and you are also responsible for...
Torsten again. Jeez, he's a busy man. Salvage, mining, and now this.
Countering any dangers that you might encounter throughout your flight. A big part of your job as an engineer is dealing with dangers that affect the mechanical parts of your ship.
Okay, perfect. We're going to be lasering everything.
And are different to the ones you would face as a pilot. There are 3 types of dangers that you will face as an engineer. One being something that you already know, which is overheating. The second being wear and tear. And the third one being malfunctions. So overheating is not only items running too hot, but it also is item running too cold. And the way that you can counter that is either actively or passively, where passively is something that we already do with the cooler on your ship, and actively being something like you standing in front of the item and using your fire extinguisher to bring down the temperature of the item. And if it's too cold, you can use a flamethrower or blowtorch. So wear and tear
Okay.
is a danger you might have.
I find that to be weird. I just find that to be weird. I don't know.
Already heard us talk about in the.
If something runs too cold, it's basically like overclocking, right? Don't they if you're like really seriously overclocking, they use the like a little flamethrower to keep it at like a normal temperature so it doesn't freeze over or whatever, like liquid nitrogen stuff. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think that's a little too much, but okay.
Past. It's just something that the longer your item runs, the less efficient it will be at some point. So a general maintenance will be required to keep them up and running. And then there is the new one, which we call malfunctions, which we'll talk about later in more detail.
Okay.
But the way that you react as the engineer there is unique to each malfunction. All three dangers contribute to the health of the item and have an impact on each other. So since the first two...
I think what we're missing here is like the passive nature of things that will likely be done in a UI that Jared very clearly at the beginning said they don't have.
Are quite easy to grasp. Let's dive a bit deeper into the malfunctions. Different items in different situations cause different errors. And while I can't talk about all of them today, here are some currently in development. There's disconnect, where you either don't have a relay right now in the place, or you don't have the item right now at the item port. Then there is power drop.
Disconnect's cool because you could board a ship and disconnect the cooler and take them down.
Where certain or the required amount of power doesn't reach the item. Then there.
Yo, FOIP is never going to be good. It's always going to be troll. You see this? FOIP is always going to be troll, dude.
Power doesn't reach the item. Then there is misfire, where wear and tear impacts the functionality of your item. Then there is cloggage, where resources are
this is the toilet, isn't it?
prevented from reaching your item. There's also power surge, where high energy reaches your item and will negatively affect the function of the item. And then there is leakage, which is similar to cloggage, where resources won't reach your item, but the cause is a little bit different. Then we have unresponsive, where you as the engineer try to communicate certain changes on the item and they will not reach the item. There is bugged, where like we have the most experience with being creative, so be surprised for what comes your way. And then lastly, we have destroyed, where you just lost your item. Bug can also be caused by hacking or being tuned incorrectly.
Hey!
It's a lot of information being thrown at you at once, but it's all like very vague at the same time. So that's a lot. It's like a lot being thrown at you at once.
Why do we introduce malfunctions? The reason is,
I think the visuals, unfortunately for me, distracted from like the information that you want to hear, but at the same time, they want to have some fun. Go ahead. Cares.
Quite simple. It's something that you know from your real life. Like after a while, certain things start to malfunction. So you better pay attention to those malfunctions and know how to react to those. So your job as an engineer is preventing those malfunctioning from actually happening, or preventing the dangers that they create on your ship. And if you don't react in time, you might end up with cascading of errors that will in the end lead to the failure of your ship. It allows us to have the engineer being as important on bigger ships like the pilot or the gunner We want to make sure that there's plenty of things to do for you as an engineer.
Okay, agreed. But there can't be too many things to do. Like, if the engineer has plenty of things to do all the time, then it's ridiculous, right? I think it's a weird thing where they should have things to do when things happen, but just because the ship is like flying around doesn't mean that you should constantly have to be moving things around or like barotrauma is too much. Right? Sea of Thieves style? I think so, where, you know, things function, but then when you do come across and experience, you know, get into a fight or whatever, I think that's where... What about preventative maintenance? Of course. That would be great. I just mean, and I don't think that this is their plan, but when he does say they would have tons of things to do, I just don't think it should be all the time, like consistently. But we'll have to see.
Your job as the engineer is also understanding the items. And that means you have to understand the different states an item can be in. States are basically stages for the items inside your ship, where each item has its individual stages or states it can be in, where, for example, you can have items that have a boot up phase. Then they have, that is followed by an ignition phase, where you have to ignite something so that it is going into the idle state, where it is basically waiting to go into the active state, where it starts to produce the resources that you actually need. Then from that active state, it will probably, or some items might go into the prime state, where you have to fire something out. Example is here an EMP. That can then go into a cooldown state, where you basically have to wait for the item to cool down again and then to be restarted or turned off. This adds a new level of complexity to you.
Yeah, it does, and it can be interesting, or it can be overcomplicated. So we'll have to see. The game's already quite difficult to get involved in, and then I worry sometimes that this is complexity for complexity's sake.
As the engineer,
instead of it actually being
fun, you not only
fun,
have to pay attention to the danger.
And that's why we'll just have to see. Like, this is cool to hear this at this stage, but I think it's always safer as a Star Citizen fan to get more excited about a feature like this when the feature is actually being added to the game, and whatever difficulties they've had implementing any of the things that they would like to do are cut, changed, all that stuff. I just can't imagine that this is exactly how it'll come in, personally. But
the malfunctions, when they appear or where they appear, is also important on which item they appear and in which state the item currently is. Because depending on the state the item currently is where the malfunction happens, it might end up you having to switch the item to a different state to be able to fix the malfunction or counter the malfunction, or even turn off the item completely because the current state requires you to restart the item completely. And yes, for some things it is as simple as turning them off and on
I knew
again.
He was going to say that by his smirk.
All of this we do to make the engineering gameplay more engaging. We still want to allow players to maintain their ships on their own, but especially for bigger ships, we really want to introduce meaningful interactions so that you decide to have several engineers on your ship. And for that, we introduced the 3 types of hats that you can wear as an engineer.
Several engineers.
The 3 basic engineering types are tuner, mechanic, and manager. So the tuner is the person that is responsible for your strategic.
Okay. Before we even get into this, and I'll back it up a little bit, there is a 0% chance that when engineering is added to the game, it has all of the things that he's talking about right now. A 0% chance. Literally none. So, like, the tuner, he's going to say what it is, but we know that there's going to be, like, the ability to tune your components and tweak them and things like that. So I imagine that would play a role, but I can't see that being like our engineering tier 0. So these are arbitrary roles not set in stone. Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. Not, to be fair, not a single thing that they're saying is going to be set in stone. It's their internal design document that they're sharing in video form, basically.
The person that is responsible for your strategic decisions. The tuner is responsible for setting up the items in advance depending on what you want to achieve with your ship. So if you want to go exploring, you ask the tuner to bring the items into a state that they are less prone to wear and tear, that they sustain longer, that they can or are more energy efficient or resource efficient. The tuner...
I don't like that. Personally, I feel like it's as simple as choosing the right component then.
defines item groups.
I thought there's supposed to be no classes. They're missing some key context here. Previously, when they've discussed the engineer role, they talked about permissions on a ship. So these players would have permissions to do that stuff.
Base resource consumptions, responsibilities or roles on your ship, as well as setting new min and max performances for all the ship items you have. So overall, the tuner is a very proactive role where we want to reward players who plan their crew activities in advance. We did plan the tuner to be more relevant in advance of your adventures, but I'm sure players will figure out ways to make use of the tuner in various scenarios.
Maybe we'll have to hear more.
You wear as an engineer is the mechanic. The mechanic plays into your fantasy of what you imagine when you think about sci-fi and the role as an engineer. It's like, in Star Trek terms, the person running around or crawling through Jeffries tubes to fix any item. Or in Star Wars terms, Chewbacca handing you the Hydro Spanner to fix up the Millennium Falcon. You are responsible for fixing fuses, figuring out what the details of the malfunctions are. You are analyzing the situation on site. So you're going through all the rooms, finding the item that you were just called out on that needs maintenance, needs repair. Depending on the item or the situation, you as the mechanic have to react individually to it, which can be a minigame-like character where you have to fix something that is unique to the malfunction that you are facing. The manager uses the engineering screen to analyze your state of the ship, and they dispatch mechanics or the tuner where need arises, and can even assist with...
It seems very, very odd, that role. Like, you dispatch mechanics. This is so hard for me to visualize right now, even though they're trying to.
Fixing certain malfunctions.
It's 7 a.m.
in Austin. They
manage
the resource consumption via the presets, the tuner prepared or manually controlling the resource distribution. And they work together with the bridge crew to ensure a successful operation of your ship.
Yeah, maybe when you're dispatching AI mechanics. Moving forward, okay.
I'm really happy that I'm actually sitting here and explaining you all the things that I just described to you, because the entire process that we had to went through was daunting, to say the least, because we are touching so many bases with so many teams. So it's a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, a lot of different opinions of what the engineer should be.
Have you ever played Bar Trauma? The manager basically is calling out what's wrong and navigating the focus of the problems. Yeah. Co-pilot role? Maybe. Like that's the thing that I struggle with. I feel like maybe it's just the naming of it. I don't know.
And now we have it written down, we have it nailed down, we know what we want, we have defined goals, what the gameplay actually should be about, and everyone agrees. So that allows us now
to move
forward fast and deliver the feature that we all have been waiting for. You, me, everyone, like Jared. It's something that we are really looking forward to, how it will play out, how you as a player will interact with the entire system, what you like, where you will bring your ships that you own and what you can make out of them, how different they will actually.
I believe he means faster than before they agree on everything, guys. We all know fast is not what they do.
Feel to what they are right now in terms of stock versus you have the perfectly tuned ship for your demands. And this might come sooner than you think. This is the good news about it, because it all ties in with all the resource network work or resource management work that we have been doing so far.
Which all of us think is really far away, though.
To work on it right now. So it is in active development. And I don't want to do any promises when you will see it, but we are doing our very best that you will be able to try it out sooner than later.
Okay.
No dates. But it's really cool. So, what did we learn here this week? Well, we learned that the hopes and dreams of multi-crew players everywhere are taking their next major step forward right now as resource management evolves into engineer gameplay. That the design spoken about here today is currently in active development and will continue throughout the remainder of this year. And that we would normally have to wait months and months to share a story until we had the visuals for it. But I work with some talented, if kind of strange people who stepped up to make this week's episode possible now. And don't worry, you know we're going to be back to show you how engineer gameplay is actually progressing later this year. Engineering is the thing that brought me into the project, and I'm as excited as ever about what's being shared here. And as for Alpha 318, I'm being told, yes, there's a message in my ear. I'm being told that it's today. Has it happened yet? It's
oh, no.
going to happen. But which one is it? You can't tell me because there's nothing in my ear, and we recorded this on Wednesday.
Wait, it works because we're watching it today.
We like to have fun. Check the website and socials for details. And thanks for watching the latest in our journey to 4.0. We'll be back with more Inside Star Citizen
We watch these on Friday.
So until then, I'm Jared Huckabee, and I don't have an outro for these J24 specials. Leave one in the comments. That'll be good.
Oh, so I don't know. My take from that is it's too early. Too early. If we look at the mining design doc that we have, it's not the experience that I have yet. It's changed quite a bit from there. I imagine once the implementation truly starts and we do see what we would be getting in whatever their version of soon is from this video, that it will probably feel a little bit different from a lot of the things that we heard today, because it will not be completely done. And we'll have to see. I guess the weirdest thing to me was the flamethrower part, the heating things up that are too cold. But there are some cold planets, right? So maybe that's a real thing. I don't know, man. It just seemed complex for complex sake, but we'll have to see what ends up happening. We'll have to see. That's just where I'm at with that. I'm a wait and see on the engineering thing. I'm not getting excited too much, you know?